Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world today, and welcome to Horsepower Empowerment Through Connection. I'm your host, Elysia Bus, and I have the great pleasure and honor of getting to connect with Ariana, Strozzi, and Mazzucchi. I was like, oh, that last bit of her name is funny. So Ariana is an incredible person. We've known each other for a few years now. And Blair says hello. Hey, Blair, one of my other favorite people. So glad that she could be with us today. And Ariana is one of the founders, one of the pioneers in the equine assisted learning and mental health industries. She pioneered equine guided education and coaching, which I happen to have this book right here that she wrote. So this is one of her many talents. She has many different books that she's written. She's a visionary storyteller. She's a zoologist, which I think is super cool, and has just done so much for our industry. So Ariana, thank you for being with us here today.
Thanks for having me. So this is great. Thanks. Yeah.
You're very welcome. We've been talking about this for a while, so I'm glad we were finally able to make it happen. So Ariana, you were with us like in the beginning, like back in 1989, you started researching more about working with horses in this particular modality. What was it like in the beginning when people were like, what is this, right?
Well, it was really interesting because in the beginning, around 1989, I was doing my intuitive horsemanship. So I was a horse trainer, a zoologist, and I was studying leadership because I was a business owner. And so I remember in one of the leadership, the more I studied leadership, the more I was like, this is really about a way of being. And so who better to tell you when you're being present and center than a horse? So I was really fortunate to have buckets of people, like from my leadership circle, from on the ranch, there was Aikido and training leaders and things like that. And so I started it by calling it leadership somatics and horses, which is like back then, like people were just like, I know, they kind of smile at me and be like, oh, that's nice, Ariana, like whatever. Like, I'd be at a horse show or expo or something and go by and people would be like, oh yeah. And then as soon as we passed, they'd be like, I'm sure like all my other horse trainer friends were like, no clue what I was doing. Like they were just like, whatever, she's weird, And I even remember like years later, like, around 1996, and I was training leaders and coaches, and bringing them out as part of that process to work with the horses, to be with the horses and learn from the horses. That's a whole nother story to tell. But I remember, I took a leadership and dignity class from Julio Alala of Newfield Network around 1990, 91. And then one of the coaches there, or maybe it was a little later, but anyway, it was, probably 9, whatever. But anyway, she was sort of like, but like 6 years later, she said, like right around 2000, she came back to me and she said, when you were talking about that, because I had this vision that I would be working with women and leaders and with the horses. And she came back to me 6, 7 years later and said, when you said that, I just thought you were kind of full of it. Like, I just thought, whatever, like that's weird. And now you're really doing it. And, even like the Institute of Women's Leadership, Ariana Sharpneck, was one of my early clients in the 90s because she went through it herself in her leadership development. And she was like, oh my gosh, there's nothing like this, to be able to see what the leaders, where their assets are in terms of their presence and where their, limitations are in terms of how they're showing up for people, and being able to then work with them to kind of close that gap and get that, so that who they are and what they believe in is also showing up and aligning, so that other people see that as a mirror, as opposed to it being disjointed. So, but even in those early years, even she was so intrigued by it because she'd seen it and been in it herself, but it took her years to get that courage up to put it in her program. And eventually she did. And then it was so powerful that it was at the first day of her 6-month program with Executive Women Leading Change for many years after that. And now, to this day, like a lot of those people that studied with me in the 90s are coming back and going, wow, look what's happened. And this is sort of more commonplace now. And, even my stepmom, was in the early years. So like, what do you do? And how do you do that? And, now she's sending me articles of other people doing it. Like it's making more sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. We have like something like 100 different modalities out there in the equine assisted learning and mental health field, which I think even some people in our industry might not know that we have such a comprehensive array of modalities available to us these days. I think it's interesting how you talk about, oh, wait, before I get into that, actually. So in this day and age, imposter syndrome is something that we hear a lot about. I'm curious how you navigated that at the beginning of your career, if that's something that you ever felt when you were first going into this, especially since it was so new.
Well, first of all, I don't really live by labels because I'm really dyslexic, but if I follow where you're tracking on the possible, I was so fascinated with what I saw. And I always put myself in the learner seat too. So I'm not standing there going, I know this stuff and therefore you should all follow me and come in there. I'm like, oh my God, look at what's going on. This is so cool. It's so fascinating. Like, let's study this. Let's be curious about this. Like, so I just really approach it that way. And, obviously when I was, in the 90s, I was, in my mid 20s and I was working with a lot of these really powerful leaders that were in their 40s and 50s. And there was a few of them that, especially men, that were like, who are you, little lady kind of thing. And They had to be in the class and they were really, very skeptical and resistant. And I just caught it. And I said, hey, I feel like you're not, it was all in, we had a lot of linguistic jargon in these programs. So I said, I feel like you're not really accepting my authority in here in this class. And he's like, you're right. I don't. And I said, well, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. Just go, if you're not open, just go sit down and let somebody else come and have their turn. And they were like, what? And then, they were just stewing in their chair the rest of the afternoon, became my best customers, took me across the country into their leadership program. So some of those early skeptics were became my biggest supporters early on, which was fascinating. And I think, to answer that question, because I'm such a lifelong horsewoman and horses are my nature and I trust them and I know how, I've always, ever since I was a little girl, watched how they interact with different people at different times. And so I trust what they see. And so in the early years, it was such a relief because I was like, oh, they're seeing what I'm seeing. Okay, so I'm not crazy. There is this miscommunication going on. Let me help this person to figure out what it is. And so I had a lot of confidence around the horses. So once the people were out with the horses, I was just embodied in myself in a way that I wasn't self-conscious and worrying about what anybody else was thinking. And I also remember early on thinking, if I want people to get curious about this really weird, crazy thing that I'm going to bring them into, I need to embody the kind of curiosity that I'm asking them to have. Like I'm asking people to, in those days, to like, this is new, this is different. Have you, and like I'd call in the challenge. Like I'd say, have you ever done this with a horse before? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, then let's just get curious about it. We're just experimenting and exploring. This isn't about knowing. This is, for leaders at that point, it was like the competitive or, the advantage is to be able to think outside the box and explore other things that other people aren't looking at as a way to open your mind and like anybody that's, a leader, there's the entrepreneurial spirit is putting two seamlessly different things together and having this really, new outcome. So I think, and people because people knew me in Aikido and they knew me in other veins. And then when they get out with the horses with me, they would consistently say, wow, Ariana, when we were there with you with the horses, there you were, you just showed up in a whole different way. And all of a sudden, I think I built trust with them in a different way than I had before. Because in those early years, I was still kind of in my own social awkwardness. I mean, I think that my miscommunication was that people would see me as being maybe standoffish or, but I was just quiet. Like I just grew up, with people would approach my father and talk to them. He never approached anybody. They came to him. And so I just would always wait for people to approach me. It wasn't that I wasn't interested in other people. I just didn't know how to do that.
Yeah.
And also just too, like me being, embodied as a cowgirl was really intimidating for some people.
Sure.
Even though, especially when I was young, I was beautiful, I was strong, and I was in my power. And that was really intimidating for some people.
Sure.
Yeah. But that's where I knew myself, right? That's who I was. And so that, yeah. And I think from a really young age, Elysia, I think there's a part of my destiny, kind of like it's even in my astrological chart, of being misunderstood and not, being unseen. And so I think I just was used to it from the time I was little. So I lived in my own little rich world of animals and plants and nature, because that was my safe place to be me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I feel like when I asked you the question of imposter syndrome, that to be when you're really present, this is what I got from you, is that when you're really present with the horses or really present in any aspect of life, there's no room for that thought of being an imposter. That doesn't kick into you because you are in a pure space of connection and embodiment. And that's what we can all strive for in our journey. Something that, like, we're not perfect people. We have our moments of being overly distracted by life, and we should give ourselves grace within that. But I just love that you're owning that. You're like, this is my journey. This is what I was connected to. I was connected to nature, and I was connected to horses, and I trusted the horses, which seems so key in the book that you wrote on equine guided education, because out of that curiosity that you were exploring with people, that's truly what you were embodying, that equine education. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And there was something else that you said, like, the more I did the work, the more I would leave class at the end of the day and walk in the field and go, oh my God, I thought I knew something. Like, I don't know anything. That's really humbling. It's different than it's a little different. I mean, it's kind of like the imposter syndrome in the sense, like, you're like, who am I? Really, kind of, right? Like, do I know what I'm doing? But I think the journey has been, I've never been like, I'm telling you, this is the journey. I'm like, I'm curious where your journey is. And I'm on my journey. Like, even when we teach our certification program now, me and my staff, we're the students too. We're in there too. I mean, and there's a great metaphor in Aikido, which is a martial art, right? And in Aikido is actually, it's about the way, like, walking the way, and the concept of the harmony being the resolution of conflict. So you can't have harmony without having had conflict, which is, I found fascinating. And when you're studying in Aikido, it's an art like horsemanship, which is a long commitment art. And you can be, if you're on the mat one day longer than somebody, then you're senpai and they're kohai, but you're not better in stature because you're senpai. In fact, the honor is, if you senpai, which is further ahead than the kohai, then your responsibility is to train with the kohai. Like, so you don't just go train with other senpai. The virtue is to train with the kohai and bring them up. And so that's just such a beautiful philosophy too,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I love that. Which I feel brings us to that conversation of the new paradigm of horsemanship that's essential now. So tell us a little bit more what that means to you.
Yeah. So, like we were, just traveling through the 90s, of like leadership horses and being fascinated with, the more I studied leadership, the more I was like, that's what we're doing when we're doing horsemanship. And really the bottom line is, leadership is about relationship. And, you know, in the early 2000s, you know, there was a lot of fads around leadership, and there was shared leadership and collaborative leadership and passive leadership and all these things. And then there was a lot of people that had resistance to coming into a leadership and horses program, because they would say, well, I'm not a leader, or I'm like, okay, wait, are you leading your life, or is it leading you? Like, are you alive? Then you basically are a leader, or you're choosing not to lead your life. So let's get over that hump. But I saw a lot of, as human beings, we had a very unconscious connotation of leadership as being bad, that to be a leader, you have to be more than, better than, smarter than, which means somebody's lesser than. Yeah. And I was like, no, that is not what this is about. And, you know, being a zoologist and studying other wildlife besides horses, and being with different kinds of social animals, I was like, you know, leadership wasn't invented by human beings. It's a social pattern of social animals. It's an instinct. And actually horses and humans have the same social instinct. And that's why we can do all this amazing stuff, because the horse is born going, who are you, relationship to me. They're not born running away from us like a prey animal. So that's a whole nother thing I don't want to get into, but let's just say, like, this is where the magic is. Like, that's why we can learn so much from the horses about our own instincts and our own communication, and like our instinct, like at horses and humans. I mean, you could just, if I'm talking about humans, you could replace it with horses. If I'm talking about horses, you could replace it with humans. Like, and there's just metaphor after metaphor after metaphor, but we can learn from the horse dramatically different than we can from human beings, because they are sentient, they're authentic, they're not really judgmental. And so people from all walks of life, whether they like horses or not, can feel like they can trust horses in a way that right away. And not even if they're scared of them, it's not, you know, but they get that whatever engagement is happening is real, as opposed to the horse is not being phony, and the horse isn't lying, and the horse, you know, I don't, you know, like to, you know, and so we bypass this self-consciousness and about worrying about what everybody else is going to think and who we are, and that imposter thing. Like, all of that is like our little weird, you know, I don't want to say monkey mind, but, you know, like what some people call it that, but, you know, it's just like the little self-doubt monster, you know, and
the limiting beliefs.
Oh yeah. Well, and all of that is designed, is an instinct, because, okay, that's where the somatics piece comes in. So mind, body, spirit. So I believe we're an animal. Like, when I was in college, I was told that animals don't feel, they don't have emotions. So I was being told that otters are not having fun when we're laughing because they look like they're having so much fun. They're not actually having fun. And little baby wolves, they're playing and we're laughing because it's so freaking cute. They're not having any fun. They're just mindlessly, emotionlessly doing things that they're going to do when they grow up. And I was just like sitting in my chair, like, are you insane? You know, like, you know, like, whoa, yeah. Like, wow. And I would get into arguments with my professors to the point of tears and just go, okay, I don't care who he is. I don't care what his title of authority is and how much I don't believe it. I don't agree. And I'm over here and I'm just, you know, if I have to be quiet about it, fine, you know? So anyhow, again, those are some like those obstacles, I guess, you know, like you're talking about overcoming, like being true to who you are and what you believe and what you see, even if other people don't see it. Right. And so, you know, come along to 2000s and I'm still competing in the horse world too, but I'm starting to have attention around how do I really keep training for competition and hold on to all the values and the beauty and the relationship that I'm seeing when I'm doing the equine guided work. Yeah. And it was very challenging. And I did a demo at the Horse Expo in 2005. And I really struggled with how do you do a demo on this? Because it's so personal. You never know what's going to happen. And you don't know, the horse is just going to find where that person's sort of vulnerable, authentic conversation is ready to be had. And to put that in an expo with thousands of people watching, it'd be like, it just didn't feel right. So I guised it into a horsemanship workshop to just sort of like, how can we be in a different relationship with our horses where we're going, wow, like, who are you? Like, how do you think? And how do you feel about this? And are we connected? And, being in that unity of relationship, that Tom Dorrance talked about in the 40s, like true unity, like, and he was talking about mind, body, spirit to cowboys, long time ago. So
yeah,
I'm sure we were like, whatever, dude, yeah. And so, so the paradigm, so I started seeing in around 2000 that, okay, there was the crash in the .com, 9/11, the people that I was working with in leadership circles, all of a sudden, like, they just really didn't know what they cared about anymore. Like, people before were really ambitious and gung-ho. Like, we were lunging horses in these exercises. Like, people didn't know nothing about lunging horses, and were able to lunge horses based on the dynamics we were setting up. But then to lunge a horse, to long line a horse, you have to have direction. You have to know what you're doing. You have to have purpose. And people didn't know what they cared about anymore. So everything had to shift, the whole way I worked and everything. And so I remember saying, we're in the infancy of a paradigm shift in consciousness. We have to change the way that we make value of our lives and the way we operate our lives to produce value and contribution and feel valued and all of those things. And the old paradigms of how, like, just even like when we put children in kindergarten in a little desk, and you have to keep your hands on your desk. You can't put them in the aisle way, and you're 5 and you're thinking, I think this is crazy, but the adults think this is normal, right? Kind of, but and there's books written on dumbing us down and the purposeful intent, in our educational systems to take away our individual authority, to take away our individual free thinking on purpose, so that by the time we're adults, we're easily led. And that there's lots of research in there, and that's written about a lot. So the other thing that started shifting around 2000 was people started coming into my classroom saying, because I'd say, like, why are you here? And they'd be saying, like, I feel called by the horses. And some people would be like, I don't even know if I like horses, but I keep dreaming about this black horse or this white horse, or so here I am kind of thing. And then people were awakening to the potentiality of the work itself. So I was like, okay, this is more than just random. There is a call. The horses are calling people. What are they calling? What are they asking for? What are they awakening in people? And so I've been studying that for the last 23 years since I have some writings in my book. And I really feel like in my story that it's sort of a story. Okay. So it's like, they're connected to everything else on Mother Earth. And, we're the humans that we're out of alignment, and we're not very respectful of the earth and plants and many animals and even people ourselves and that kind of stuff. And I feel like the horses have been chosen to be the messenger to help us to awaken into a new, how can we be more respectful of ourselves, of other people, of our earth? We're all connected, and we have to, that's the mindset we have to shift. That everything is a consequence, like it has a cost or benefit. Like the way I am in the world and the energy I put out there is impacting somebody else, whether I think it is or not. So as a parent, how I am is impacting my children. How I am at work is impacting other people. And basically we've been kind of going along, not talking about it. And so there's a lot of silent suffering and isolation and feeling separated, which leads to, anxiety and depression and stress and all those other things. And we're a social animal. We're supposed to, connect and be together. And so the last piece I wanted to say about that was, I remember in 2005 going, okay, the horse world's just not quite ready for this yet. But I also started seeing that like a lot of my, because it's going to change everything.
Right.
It changes everything. And so about how we work horses, how we train horses, our whole system of competition. Think about the billions of dollars that are being spent on our competitions, and the horses for that. And that would all have to get reevaluated in some way.
Sure.
So, and I remember, then too, like I would have clients come to me kind of like in private and like whispering, like, I don't know, like I have this trainer, but I just don't want to do what they're doing. Like, I know my horse has a lot of potential to like be this amazing jumper, but I just want the relationship. And so they would get coaching. They wanted me to help them figure out how to have the bravery to talk to the trainers. Like, actually, I just really want to have a relationship with my horse. Like that should be good enough.
Yeah, I love that there are more trainers that are more natural these days. I love what Warwick Schiller is doing. I know that you were on his Journey Home podcast, which was amazing. And yeah, I love that he's really expanding. There's so many people following him these days and having that natural connection.
Yeah, and that's like fast forward. So like being on his podcast and getting connected with him, and I'm going to present at his summit. And we had our first little presenters meeting and listening to all the other presenters. And I'm like, oh my God, we're finally here. I'm not the only one. There's a bunch of us that are talking about this. Like, oh, what a relief, I just, and that bigger aspect of the paradigm shift and our willingness to, to step in to that unknown adventure. It's an adventure, So, yeah, it's, it transcends, I think our mind, like our rational, logical mind, must get a little confused. Like, whoa. Like the more you see this stuff, the more you're like, whoa, like one of the things I love when we do our classes is you can feel like when there's a collective resonance, like our energies start to calibrate together.
Sure.
There's a unity that ripples out, and the horses really want to be part of that. And they are the ones teaching us how to do that without words, And so I think that, if we can awaken ourselves and trust our own feelings and sensations and our animal body, like I was saying earlier, I didn't finish that, but our animal body is our first responder. It responds to everything first, and it remembers everything. It holds all of our experiences and memories. And so, and then the mind comes along after the fact and tries to make up a story about it or interpretation about what's happening and trying to control it. And maybe our parent did, or maybe our parent was like, don't cry, or that person shouldn't be bothering you. Like, suck it up, kind of whatever. And,
sure.
So from the time we're little being taught, like, don't listen to your body. Don't trust yourself. And
keep pushing through the pain.
Yeah. And I think that the paradigm possibility is it's not so threatening that we can all awaken into our own, that we all have the freedom of our own self-expression. And we don't have to make somebody else wrong to make ourselves right. And nobody should make us wrong to make themselves right, because it's not a right or wrong. Like the animal world doesn't live in rights and wrongs. The human animal, we are the moral animal. And it's, we have this bad habit of judging others so that we can feel better about ourselves or justify our position. And I think that's got to go.
It's definitely not a helpful trait to have, to treat people in such a way, or yourself really. And I'm excited to have more people coming together in the equine industry from the standpoint of collaboration instead of scarcity, right? We have more abundance mindset that's happening in the equine industry because there's like a million different thoughts on how to do the right thing with their horses dependent upon industry, and really having healthy conversations of neutral curiosity so you can see who you align with and who you can just like wish well on their journey and move on in your day, and just modeling that we don't need to get into antagonistic conversations with someone. We can just kindly say like, hey, thanks for letting me know where you stand. And you might not even need to respond because you already know that you don't align with them and it's not something that's going to be received.
Yeah. And I just find like, I just don't have any patience for it anymore. Like I started an Equine Guide Education Association, and I held 8 international conferences. I brought everybody, from around the world, like Linda Konoff, Kathy Pike, Carolyn Resnick, anybody that was doing anything, Barbara Rector, everybody, the beginners, the pioneers, whoever's. And because I wanted to see like, what are we doing and what do we have in common? And what makes us unique, and like, what is this thing, kind of. So it was very non-denominational. It was just, bringing all this and trying to get us into curious, inquisitive conversations, which was challenging. But there was people that were like, yes, let's keep trying. Let's keep stretching that muscle, Yeah. But at one point I put the association to sleep in the forest, kind of like Snow White, because I just woke up one morning going, I'm not having any fun. I'm just feel like I'm busy politicking with other associations, and it, it's like, who's this and who's that and this way and that way. And I'm like, I'm just not interested in that. I'm interested in the work. I'm interested in helping people. I want to help people. I feel like if I can help one person heal, they can help figure out how to help heal the planet. Like, that's the big thing for me, is healing people should be really about healing the planet. Like, when we're healing people and we're sending them back out into a diseased world, Earth, we're just recycling illness. And so that's kind of.
I talked to somebody who's a parenting coach. She's actually coming on for, we're doing a group coaching call tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on parenting our parents, the sandwich generation, for people who are parenting both their children and helping their elderly parents. But the reason I bring her up is because her thought, Amanda Ertz is her name, is that she wants to help parents so that the parents can be better for the kids instead of just specifically addressing the children. And it's good to help the children, of course, but oftentimes I think the parents get left out of that, and we forget that role modeling is so important regardless of the age, so that we're inhabiting within our bodies as we walk through this beautiful world. So, yeah.
Well, and two, the other thing I'm seeing a lot, actually, it's really great that she's doing that and focusing on that, like niching it out, because, in my work, I see a lot of, people with, whether it's the children, adult children, and whether it's the, aging parents, whatever, but there's so much trauma that's been passed down. And it's this, there's blood memory trauma. There's, like, so a lot of our grandparents went through World War II, or there's all kinds of trauma in there. And that just kind of got passed down, unspoken, right? And so, we're in a lifetime now, generations of, okay, maybe my parent didn't have the ability or the capacity for compassion or for these other things because they were in survival mode, and that was that, and that, you don't have time for folly and blah, 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 So, but that was their era. And how do I come into my present era and help my child? And that's the other thing with our children. We have no idea at all what their world's going to look like. 10 or 20 years. Like, as being a parent, you're like, holy, how am I going to help my kid? Well, you can't help them with what you did or what your parents did, or all you can help them is to have thinking, to have free thinking, to have curious, inquisitive thinking, to be able to be flexible and resilient, to not stay stuck in the know, like KNOW or the NO too, right? But, like, so to honoring the generations, but I also feel like this is where I get really kind of far out there, Elysia, like, because of what I see in classes. And like, this is where I used to not really want to talk a lot about it unless we were in smaller circles and everybody was sort of like, let's talk about it. But I feel like that's part of the paradigm shift, is that we're bringing back, and I used to be really resistant to saying feminine this or masculine that, because it's not about, the sex or anything like that.
About the energy.
But there's something about the feminine wisdom and all those women being burned at the stake, our medicine women, our earth, women. And that trauma is still like just the ugly elephant under the, or, and we should just stop even calling it the elephant under the rug, right? Because poor elephant, it's not really, but the burned witches under the rug kind of thing. But like whoever I talk to, whatever their, therapist or this or that, they're seeing these patterns as well. Like people wanting to get more into art and creative journaling and nature and hands-on planting and soil. And that's all tapping into our intuitive intelligence, our native wisdom. We all have native wisdom in our sinew. And I think that the instinct, if you're listening, is to tap into that, because that's really what's going to help us navigate the future.
Yeah, the naturalistic intelligence. It's a beautiful one for us to be able to develop. And I love that we have nature-based psychotherapy now as well, so that people are able to do their counseling sessions out in nature. And that's like a real and valid thing. I think there's the Earth-Based Institute, something like that provides that as a certification program. But I love how we've talked a lot about leadership. There was something that keyed into me a little bit about the leadership aspect, which I find interesting, is that the word dignity can be really power-packed for some people. Like there's just concepts that are wound within that. It's a person being dignified, which can be like, what age of society are you living within to be not something as dignified, right? And so it's interesting and fun to get to break that down. So you talk about leadership being dignified and the art of being, right? And it's not about the title of authority. So you want to tell us a little bit more about that, and also how horses have helped in that?
Well, for the people that are listening that know horses, they know that a horse doesn't care about how smart you are or your title of authority, how much money you make or the car you drive. They really care about if you're being authentic.
Yeah.
And if you know what you care about and you're in touch with yourself, that's what they're curious about. And so that's important. God, I had about 10 directions I was going to go and they all just disappeared.
Happens to me sometimes too.
Yeah. So go ask that part again.
So in regards to being dignified.
Oh yeah. Okay. So dignity, I'm glad you asked the question, because obviously I wrote a book about it, my own search for dignity. But so obviously I've been in the conversation and like, what is that? And even just in trying to decide what to call the book, right? Like, what's the book really about? So to me, dignity is, again, we are social animals. Our instinct, like the horse, we're born to want to be part of the group, part of the herd or the tribe. And in order to do that, we need to make a contribution, which means we need to give value to the community. And in turn, we need to feel valued.
Yeah.
So our instinct is to want to be of value and to feel valued. And so dignity is to be acknowledged, to be accepted, and to be like recognized, I guess, seen. And I just work with so many people, men and women, who are very successful on the outside, and inside, they don't feel like they're good enough. You know, that's probably going back to your earlier, like the imposter piece, like the little critical gremlin in there going, you're not, you know, you're no good, you're never good enough, you know, like shame, shame. Yeah. This, like the, what's the little guy in the Hobbit? He's got his little, his little, he's like, my precious.
Yes.
You know, let's stay in my little dungeon.
So funny. I have seen that movie so many times. And right now I'm just like, what?
Gollum.
Yeah.
Is it Gollum?
We all know who you're talking about, but for some reason, neither of us, our brains are just like, what was that guy's name again?
And so dignity is, you know, I think sometimes people think,
Smeagol.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, good. Thanks. Yeah. Okay, good. I think sometimes people think that, you know, it's sort of like integrity, like somebody else has to give you dignity. And I mean, I think I spent a lot of my life looking for somebody to approve and to be seen and acknowledged for who I am. And I could see at some point in my evolution that, I mean, somebody once said, like, who do you need approval from? Like, who's the person that's going to give you like your own dignity? Like, and then the more I searched, the more I thought, well, actually there's nobody. Like anybody could say it to me. I have to say it from inside myself. You know, so in the ultimate, it's the same thing with respect. Like, you know, a lot of times we're searching for respect from others. Like, I just want to be respected, or, you know, I just need, that person's not respecting me. Not, you know, probably they're not. Like, there's a lot of people that are not respecting us out there. True that, right? So what we do about it? What we do about it is come back into myself. As long as I trust myself and I respect myself, then I have full permission and authority to be unapologetically myself. Yeah. And I call it, and my new thing is standing tall without apology. Like, and if I do that and you do that, and then somebody else does that, then we're inspiring other people to do them.
Absolutely. You know? Yeah. Modeling. All comes back to role modeling again, just getting to role model being your authentic self. So when I do my empowerment coaching, I tell people, I help people to live an unapologetically authentic life. Mindfully, yet unapologetically, because when you're being mindful, you don't have to be apologetic as much.
Yeah. Or when, and it's funny because mindful is mindless, right? So when you're mindful, you're actually not in your mind, right? And that's why you're not in your shame. You're not, you know, again, our mind is most of what it spends most of its time doing is worrying about what everybody else is going to think of us.
Yeah. There's so much to that. Just how we're raised.
And the social animals, the worst fear for a horse or a human is to be excommunicated, ostracized, isolated, separated out. And we know that from watching horse get separated, but our instinct is in there too. Like, that's the fear. And that's, you know, one of those, that's the core, whether we're working with youth now or, you know, or adults, like thinking about, like, you know, the peer pressures that, and then all this stuff with the social media, you know, and how that's, you know, our social instinct is getting caught in that social platform, but we're listening to people we don't know, that we maybe shouldn't trust, et cetera, and so on. You know, it spins off.
So how do the horses help us to be better communicators and listen to that energy, especially for the younger people that are coming up, that are dealing with that more?
I think spending time with horses and spending time in nature, your animal body kind of equilibrates. It has to, because it's like, okay, I'm outside. I need to have more awareness. Like I need to have more, I call it common sense. Like I need to have more sensate awareness around me. And so our animal bodies and our sight, sound, smell, tactile, all that stuff is getting initiated, and engaged. And so we can be getting embodied experiences just from that. So being with horses, like let's say I'm working with a youth that has trust issues with people. They're not going to trust the facilitator, but they might trust the horse. And so I leave them, not alone, but I let them build a communication with the horse and the relationship with the horse. And as time goes on, get curious about like, well, so what's your relationship like with your horse? And how did you build that? And nothing about people, like kind of things. So I think being around horses, our body will naturally, come into itself. And then there's the opportunity and the challenge of the human facilitators. So based on how the other humans are facilitating the process, that can either sort of, that could stay sort of unawared in the body, or it could be like encouraged to go, how do you feel now? And what do you notice? And how did you get there? And, what's your possibilities now? And then now here you are in your old state, and the horse is mirroring your attitude, of because the horses are going to mirror either your old stuck story or your new story. And sometimes people are talking about their new story, but their stuck story is like all over their body, and the horse is swishing their tail and being grungy. And we're like, okay, this is what's in your body right now. So we have to attend to that. So I think, again, it's the skill, even if a facilitator, let's say, doesn't really hold the space. I don't know how to say it, but a person's still going to have an experience with a horse. So things are still happening anyway. But I think one of the skills for the facilitators is to create an open space for learning. It's an open, non-judgmental space. And so one of the most important things I've learned from horses is the whole way that they're non-judgmental. They just wait patiently for that person to show up. And they also know when that person's not ready to go into some trauma. They know that. And sometimes I see humans trying to push into that trauma, and it's not time. And that person doesn't feel safe. And the horses are amazing at knowing when it's time and when it's not time. And they have, because they're such huge energy balls, they have a way of, moving that energy through and teaching us how to move energy through. So we're, the old energy, the new energy, whatever, and again, to me, the power is, it's all about having self-awareness, knowing when I'm being present, being able to know when I'm present, know when I'm not present, know when I'm triggered by something, someone.
Sure.
How do I come back? So choice follows awareness. So I was talking to somebody the other day, it's a whole nother topic, but it's like the difference between reacting. So react. So I'm reacting, responding, reacting versus acting, purposefully choosing action.
Yeah.
And so that's the key. By the horse being able to, the person will feel when the horse connects to them, whether somebody else says that or not. And that's where we're building. So we're just as importantly building new memory banks in the body for, this is when I'm being authentic with myself.
Yeah. And like listening to your intuition, learning how to listen to your intuition, I think is really important for us to learn or relearn as we step out of that space sometimes over the course of our lives, depending on our experience.
Yeah. And I mean, I just get 20 years later, like people emailing me, calling me like, wow, Ariana, that day with horses changed my life. And, even some of them are a little bit like, I wasn't sure I liked you at the end of the day, but But what was happening was really, really real, and it was really important. And it just took me a while to see it, but they say over and over again, the moment that, Ruby, when I was saying this one thing, like I was really being true to myself, and the horse just stood up so strong, like I never forgot that. And so that's a new memory. So it's like, use that memory. So when you go into a place and there's a conflict, bring that body, that remembered presence with the horse with you.
Yeah.
So students taught me that by telling me that that's what they figured out to do.
Yeah.
It's
beautiful.
So,
for people who are new to the horse industry, doing equine assisted learning and mental health, whatnot, what would you say is the one thing that is not thought of as much and spoken about when we go into the industry? Like, how could we support our listeners that might be new in the industry, or old and might still be struggling? Who knows?
So the question being like how to enter into it, in a sense, or
no, like the question being more, what's something that you didn't think of when you went into the industry and you do the work that you didn't realize that you needed to know to either run a better business or facilitate better? Just like a small little nugget, since we're running low on time.
I think the most important thing, Elysia, is you have to know yourself. You have to, if you're going to facilitate this and have other people become so vulnerable, you need to have gone through your own vulnerability process, so you need to have, so you need to know yourself really well. You need to know what your triggers are and how to get out. You need to know where, that little dungeon is and your shame place and how to get out of there. Like, you need to know all of those things. If you're going to ask people to do their own transformation, I think it's important that you have gone through your own, because
keep doing the work.
Yeah, you learn by doing it. And also, like, I think the thing I see a lot too is people feel like they have to drop everything they've ever been or known or done and do this. And it's like, no, it's add on. Your life skills are building on who you are, how you see. And the biggest thing is letting the horse be your teacher. Follow the horse. Trust the horse. Don't, if the horse is seeing something you don't see, go with the horse. Because if you don't, that's when things can get dangerous. And that's a big story to tell. But I think that's really important. And finding people, whether it's the teacher that you want to study with or a group of people that you feel energetically aligned with, that you feel authentic with, that have the same sort of philosophical or value system that you do. That's going to be really important, because the horses are smelling everything. So they'll smell a discord between a team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Speaking of which, where can people find you in the world today if they'd like to connect with you for coaching or podcasts or anything else?
I am at my name, Ariana Mazzucchi.com. So it's Ariana, M as in Mary, AZZUCCHI.com. And I have different, on that website, I have different kinds of coaching packages and intuitive horsemanship online packages. I now have the ability to do like horse mentorship virtually with some really cool gear I have. Awesome. And and I'm starting a creative circle for people being able to, do journaling and art and stuff in a community, collect, in a way to access this sort of, intuitive landscape we're heading into. And for the equine guided education, we have a certification program, and you can find that on SkyHorse Academy. And we have an upcoming Horses Healing Humans class here in California in July. We do have other, people who have studied with us in different places. So if somebody wants to, check in that way. So my email is just arianamazzucchi@gmail.com. I have like 4 books, so you can look me up on Amazon. Some are Ariana Strozzi, some are Ariana Strozzi Mazzucchi. And my latest book is The Water Calls, One Woman's Journey to Reclaim Her Dignity and Freedom. And that's my personal sort of memoir journey of the deeper cut of this healing, piece. And it's all about, it's my journey to try to understand what was happening in this certain really difficult period of my life, and how did I get there, and how did I get myself out, and how do I change this pattern of abuse that I was experiencing. And so I started writing it in the third person so that nobody would have to know it was me. And actually, for many years, some of the stories were stories I'd use in my teaching, because I thought I've worked with over 7,000 people now. Like we all have pain and we all have a wound, but like maybe someone would see themselves at some point in this transition, this opportunity to change their form, like transform. And here's what I did, and this is how I did it, and this, But anyway, it's every chapter has an animal. Emma speaks to the animals and the land, and so it's sort of got a whimsical piece to it, even though it's a deep story. And at the end of every chapter, I actually come back into the present and say, this is actually really what I was struggling with that time, and I couldn't see it. I couldn't, so it's like, analyzing that, and then opportunities and contemplations for the reader. So using metaphors like domestication and the Titanic, this unsinkable ship, kind of thing, and the storm, and then time in nature. So every chapter has time in nature. I've done illustrations in there and poems. So, it's really like, I wanted to share my journey as an opportunity for somebody else, like, to be able to go through their own journey, and that you're not alone. And actually, I was just talking to somebody the other day, again, I'm getting a little deep here, but the pandemic of women coming back into their dignity and their freedom, it's a thing. So.
Yeah, no, there's a lot there. And as we tell those stories, we become permissionaries, so that others can then tell their own.
Permissionaries. That's a great. I love that.
Feel free to use it in the next one.
Oh, I love it. That's great.
Thank you. So Ariana, I really appreciate your time today. It's been such a pleasure to get to sit down and chat with you this afternoon. And I always just wrap with one last question, which is, who inspires you in the world today?
I've been giving that a lot of thought. It's really nature, Mother Earth. I mean, she's amazing. She's intense. She's unsentimental. She's fierce. She's loving. She's all of these things. And I'm forever fascinated by her and the lessons I can learn from her. So I think that's my go-to.
That's really beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing that. And again, thank you for being with us here today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
You're very welcome. I'm glad. So to anybody who's been watching, please, I hope you enjoyed today's interview. You can check more interviews out on Anchor and so that's now Spotify, YouTube, and of course on the Instagram. So at Horsepower Empowerment Through Connection. We have more interviews coming up tomorrow that will be streaming on my main Facebook page if you want to check it out. Interesting interview with questions about consent, persona work to help be your full self, and navigating tender conversations of sex. So not horse things, but still human things, because consent with humans is just as important as the consent that we have in our interactions with our horses. So everybody have a wonderful day. And until next time, we'll see you later.